Well, hello, everyone. This is Bob Doppelt with the ITRC. Welcome to the second session of the Community of Practice that we're offering. And I want to, before we get going, say thank you to all of our co-sponsors and also ask everyone to put themselves on mute, please, so there's no background noise. Again, I'm not going to read the co-sponsors, but as I did the first time, but I just want to thank everyone, and many of you who are participating are from these organizations. Just want to thank you all for co-sponsoring. We've seen that almost all of or most of you have created a site for yourself on the Climate Forum website, the CTIP Climate Forum website. We appreciate that and hope that you all can begin to communicate. We also saw that many of you posted your homework assignment, your elevator speech there, and some of you actually found that other people lived in the same region that you did and began to communicate. So that's what we're hope that forum will do. So please continue to post your documents there, connect with others, etc. And we're going to send out in post and chat here. Christian's going to send out in chat his contact if you need help with the CTIP Climate Forum. And also to tell you, to give you instructions for the video, how to use it, etc. So you should be able to get more information about it. I want to just reaffirm again that the key message of the community of practice is that community is medicine. And again, throughout history, the ability of people to band together has always been key to responding creatively and adapting to and solving complex challenges and problems, and that's what we're facing now. And by working at the community level, again, we can do this. So we must really try to all remember, if trauma can be passed down through generations, then so can healing and what we call transformational resilience. We're going to go a little bit deeper into that today. And this is our mission, to try to pass down and create this healing and transformational resilience. So just to recap what we talked about last week, the climate ecosystem biodiversity catastrophe, as I call it, is a civilization-altering event. We've got to get our heads around that. That is going to either severely stress or traumatize everyone. And solutions require transformational changes in many aspects of society. We're not going to just tweak existing systems and solve this issue and address this issue. And one of the essential changes, we'll have to have essential changes in our energy systems and our economic systems, many others, but one other is to expand the way we prevent and heal mental health and psychosocial struggles by embracing a public health approach to mental wellness and resilience in communities. This requires establishing the horizontal social infrastructure, connections between people across the community and organizations that actively engages residents, groups, organizations in what we call multi-systemic activities. That is, multiple numbers of activities, not one single kind of intervention that builds and sustains population level presencing or self-regulation and purposing and adversity-based growth from the bottom up, getting people engaged. And if we do this, we're seeing in many communities already, we can build population level transformational resilience. So today we're going to talk about how to organize and operate these community level mental wellness and resilience building initiatives. And we are honored to have two really outstanding presenters with us today. Becky Turner is going to join us in a few minutes. She's already online, but who's the Director of Community Engagement with the Community Resilience Initiative in Walla, Washington. And Mebane Boyd, who's a Resilient Community Officer from the North Carolina Healthy and Community Resilience Initiative, and we'll hear from them in a few moments. Before we hear from them, I want to talk a little bit more about what we're trying to do here, but I want to start with just taking a resilience pause. I hope that you practiced this last week during the week, but if not, I encourage you to practice this in the future because this is something for you, and it's also something you can learn how to teach others in your community, which is really going to be vital. So you might want to start by just taking a moment to use what I call the skylight method to notice what you are experiencing right now in your body, mind, and emotions. Without trying to change anything, there's no right or wrong. You're just trying to become aware of what's going on, and imagine that you're looking down at yourself through a skylight in the roof at yourself objectively. What's going on in your body? Anything tense? Any feels good? Pain, etc. What's going on in your mind? Are your mind racing or feeling good? What's going on in your emotions? So just take a moment to use the skylight method to just notice what's happening within you. And then you can continue to practice the skylight method, but then let's practice another presencing resilience skill we call resourcing. This is from the Trauma Resource Institute, TRI, and you're going to hear from Elaine Miller-Karras later in the community of practice about this. So I'd like you to bring to mind someone or something that helps you get through difficult times and gets you hope. Maybe it's your spouse or a significant other, or a religious or spiritual leader, or something like that. Or maybe it's the image of being next to a stream and watching it, or something else that helps you get through difficult times. Just bring to mind someone or something that helps you get through difficult times and gives you hope for the future. And as you bring that to mind, fill in some of the details about why that person or thing helps you get through difficult times and gives you hope. Why is it that this happens? What is it about them? Or that resource that calms you and gives you hope? Just see if you can fill in some details. Oh, it's because they hug me when I'm doing that, or that I feel like I'm holding on to something solid, or that I'm in a safe spot. Whatever it is, fill in little details. And as you do that, try to bring a vivid image in your mind to create that vivid image in your mind about the resource. Bring it to life right now. See that person, see that thing in your mind, and then use the skylight method to notice what's happening when you actually bring it to life with you right now. Yeah, this is called resourcing. You'll learn more about it. We'll practice it more, but it's a presencing skill. It helps people come back to the present moment, and you tell us if it helped you calm your body, mind, and emotions. With that, let's start off with breakout rooms for 10 minutes, just to get to know each other a little bit more. Jesse's going to break you into groups of 3 to 4 or 5 people. So after you introduce yourself, just say in one word how you feel in the present moment. What stood out from you about last week's community of practice? Did you take a resilience pause daily and practice a breath-based presencing skill? And did you teach it to others? And if so, how would that go? Maybe you didn't have the time to do that. And then describe your elevator speech that we asked you to think about writing. Who did you, how did it go to write it? Who did you share it with? How did they respond? Any questions that emerge? So just have a dialogue about that for 10 minutes. Christian's going to post these questions or points in chat, and Jesse's now going to break you up into breakout rooms. So we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Just putting the questions in chat here for everyone. And I'm opening the rooms now. You should see the timer come on, and we'll see you all back here very soon.
Great. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had good conversations. If anybody wants to share anything about what happened in the conversations, key points, questions, please post that in chat and we'll come back to that soon. But we're not going to do it right now. So I want to just give a brief sort of background information before we hear from Becky and Mebane. And just part of this we talked about last week, but I'm trying to go a little further in it. And part of it's new, I think, that the climate ecosystem biodiversity catastrophe, as I call it, really requires that we redefine what we mean by and how we define mental health and psychosocial problems. This is going to, the adversities generated by it are going to continue for decades. In fact, they're going to worsen for decades. So personal, family, and community and societal traumas, as we defined it last week, are going to be ongoing. There's going to be no resolution, fix, or closure to this strict, like most disasters that come to an end and you spend time recovering. This is just going to continue in a different ways. So billions of people, and we're already seeing this in many places. I work a lot now with people in Africa and other places working with folks, and they're feeling that sense of hopelessness, which you could also call spiritual distress, loss of spirit and hope in the world, which is really at the root of many mental health and psychosocial problems. If you feel hopeless, you might adopt a coping mechanism, drug use, alcohol use, whatever, that really is not healthy for you, or psychosocial problems. You take out your distress on others. So often I use the term psychosocial spiritual distresses because they're connected. And consequently, we're already seeing, but increasingly see many, many people who show symptoms of anxiety, depression, grief, anger, aggression, or more. But in many ways, these are going to be normal reactions to dysfunctional external conditions, not necessarily symptoms of pathology. So we have to look at these as sort of coping mechanisms. These are the mechanisms that people adopt to cope with the distress they're experiencing that go awry, that go wrong, not necessarily the same thing as a mental health problem. So we need to therefore also redefine how to address these issues. And we've talked about this a number of times, but we must really expand our current approach, which is really individualized mental health and human services, to proactively engage residents in strengthening protective factors that help prevent the use of coping mechanisms that can harm the self, others, or the natural environment, that help people recover from and heal when they do use these unhelpful coping mechanisms, and that also motivate people to use adversities as transformational catalysts to find new meaning, purpose, courage, and hope in life. And this is going to be critical because we really have to, our mission is to help transition communities from being trauma organized to be resilience enhancing. This is based on Sandy Bloom's work. Many of you know Sandy, an old friend of mine. I know she helped start CTIP, and I've adapted it some. But these are sort of the common traits of trauma organized communities, where the community is organized around protecting itself from trauma in many ways. And I'm just going to quickly go through these, and then I'm going to talk about resilience enhancing communities and common traits. Not all trauma organized communities have all these traits. They're all different. But up at the top, there's constant fear about psychological, physical, or emotional safety. Moving to the right, there's lack of clarity about what it means to be well and the principles to guide decision making to achieve it. There's lack of good emotional management within the community. There's lack of agreed upon acceptable behaviors and practices that constitute good emotional management. Organizations and groups and services are siloed, leading to conflicts between and poor services and gaps in services. There's often rigid and often punitive rules and regulations, especially when dealing with people who show symptoms of mental health or psychosocial issues. There's constant groupthink, causing the inability to learn from issues and correct mistakes. There's failure to acknowledge or correct injustices and abuses of power and authority. There's the inability to grieve tragedy and losses, which creates a cycle of reenactment. We haven't grieved it, so we continue to play it out and do it again, often trying to work it out in ourselves. There's often top-down authoritarian leadership and decision-making that occurs because of this, and poor communications. There's lack of empathy, compassion and trust and social supports among the members of the community. And all of that leads to little awareness of or concern about their environmental impacts. So it makes the climate emergency much worse. In contrast, here are the common traits of resilience enhancing communities. Again, not all show this, and there's usually a mix of both trauma organized and resilience enhancing traits, but there's a robust sense of safety among members and stakeholders. There's widespread agreement on what it means, what well-being and resilience means, and the principles to guide decision-making to achieve that. Most people are emotionally well-regulated. There's widespread agreement, consequently, on acceptable behaviors or practices. And there's numerous partnerships and collaborations among groups and organizations. And the rules and regulations that foster safety and trust are just and equitable and make sense. And consequently, people embrace and utilize criticisms and concerns about activities to learn and improve, not oppose them. There's a clear commitment to social responsibility, equity, and social justice. They openly acknowledge and mourn tragedy and losses so that everybody can release their trauma. There's democratic decision-making and open two-way communications. Therefore, there's strong level of trust and empathy and compassion and social supports. And they therefore often think about and constantly look for ways to reduce their environmental impacts. After today's session, we're going to post on the CTIP Climate Forum site a form you can use, a checklist, so to speak, you can use to go through and sort of determine whether your neighborhood or community, the extent to which it's trauma organized or resilience enhancing. And again, it'd be very helpful for you to do that. And what's really important is that to address these issues, we really have to address all 4 levels of impacts for human services, if you will, but levels 3 and 4 really have to be our top priority. So this is the pyramid of change, if you will, and the level of impact. The greatest impact, based on this graphic, is at the bottom level, which are the roots of the problem. And the least impact, but still very important, are at the top level. The top level symbolizes reactive, symptoms-based responses, treatment. The bottom is proactive, multi-systemic prevention and healing. So the most powerful is expand the mental models, the assumptions, beliefs, and perceptions that people have about the causes of mental health and psychosocial struggles, et cetera, and solutions to them. And then the next, after that happens, and you only can achieve this after it happens, is to create systems change, creating systems that use these multi-systemic approaches to build and sustain population-level mental wellness resilience that heal, that prevent and heal distresses and traumas. And this is the focus of these community initiatives that use a public health approach to build population mental wellness and resilience. It's going to remain important, however, direct services are going to remain important. They can reach lots of individuals with direct service approach. And then the least, the very important, but the least impact, simply because of the number of people they reach, is individualized treatment, reaching out to individuals. So they're all important, but we really have to focus on levels 3 and 4. And this is especially critical because the climate ecosystem biodiversity catastrophe really offers us the opportunity for profound transformation. There's going to be a lot of distress and pain that comes as this gets worse, but this also offers the chance for transformation. And think about your own lives, think about people you know, and think about society historically as a whole, that it's a primal truth that, as painful as it can be, adversity is often the greatest impetus for learning, growth, and transformation. One way to think about it is what the caterpillar calls the end of the world. It becomes a butterfly, and we call it a butterfly. So, it's the end of their life, but in fact, it creates another situation that's really powerful. So just to imagine the benefits of preventative transformation resilience initiatives in your community and worldwide, where grassroots, neighborhood, civic, youth, climate, faith, spirituality, and many other community leaders come together to create strategies that build population level mental wellness, and transformational resilience. And every adult, adolescent, and young child has the opportunity to learn simple, self-administrable, age and culturally appropriate, what I call presencing skills, or self-regulation and co-regulation skills. That includes being part of strong social support networks, connecting with local resources, and more. And everyone therefore also learns simple, self-administrable purposing skills, as I call it, which are adversity-based growth skills. That is, how to, rather than running from it, going into a self-defensive or survival mode, we turn towards adversities and use them as catalysts to find how to new meaning, purpose, and hope in life. And to do that, we have to address all our relations, all the different levels described in the social ecological model, not just the individual model. And that basically requires the formation of what we call resilience coordinating networks. You're going to hear from Becky and Mebane in a second about how they do this work. But each community and neighborhood region should use terms for this group that resonates locally. But these resilience coordinating networks are based on the knowledge that positive change is more likely to occur when the people it affects are actively involved in the change process. And active participation by residents also has the greatest chance for developing the ownership required to continually strengthen and sustain those protective factors. So here's a 6-step process that we're going to now go through for how do you organize these resilience coordinating networks and what you're trying to do. Today, we're going to focus on step 1, how do you get these organized and clarify the missions, et cetera. Next week, we're going to dive into step 2 to begin building community capacity. And for the next 5 sessions after that, we'll deal with each of these 5 core areas. In the last 2 sessions of the community practice, we're going to deal with step 5 or 6. So there is no single right way to organize a resilience coordinating network, but you're now going to hear from 2 people who will describe really 2 exciting ways that they got organized. So without further ado, I want to introduce Becky Turner, who's the Director of Community Engagement with the Community Resilience Initiative in Walla Walla, Washington. Becky, thank you for making this presentation. It's all yours.
Thanks, Bob. I am going to attempt to share my screen, everybody. Here we go. As Bob had described, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. My name is Becky Turner. I am located in Walla Walla, Washington State. So we're up in the Pacific Northwest, and just like communities all over the United States and worldwide, we have unique problems, factors that influence the trauma and resilience that we experience here. Right now, we have built ourselves into a nationwide organization that provides training in the science of trauma and resilience. But how did we get there? Well, we started by responding to a specific community need. When CRI, Community Resilience Initiative, was first organized, it was because we were looking at a problem that existed within one of our alternative schools in Walla Walla. Lincoln Alternative High School had low attendance rates, it had low graduation rates, and it had really high rates of student on student or student on faculty violence. And it was kind of like a microcosm. This is something that isn't experienced by the rest of the schools in Walla Walla, but it is being experienced by this one alternative high school. What's going on at Lincoln? So we started out and we were called the Children's Resilience Initiative. And we were really focused on trying to learn what's going on at Lincoln. What are the factors that are driving these student behaviors? What's going on within the students' lives that's preventing them from achieving? Ultimately, we're all from the same community. We should have the same trajectory, right? But it wasn't the case at Lincoln. So what we did, we used a multidisciplinary trauma-informed framework to work with those students. We got to know them on an individual basis. What's going on with you in your life outside of school that might be influencing what's going on at school? What are the dynamics that exist between students that are creating these situations where we have student-on-student violence? And through taking that approach where we looked specifically at what was driving the behavior of those students, we were able to implement a resilience-based approach. We discovered that the students at Lincoln Alternative High School had a myriad of factors, including a significant amount of childhood trauma. Through working with that framework, we saw increased graduation rates, we saw increased attendance rates, and we saw decreased violence. The result of this work was turned into what I had always thought was a local documentary, but I guess it's made it a little bit broader out into the nationwide community. It's a documentary called Paper Tigers. I think you can find it on Amazon still. So what have we done beyond Paper Tigers? This could have started as a single initiative designed to assist one school in achieving some of those benchmarks. But what we learned was the lessons apply to the broader community as a whole. We discovered that what worked for Walla Walla could also work for others. So what happened was the Children's Resilience Initiative was eventually transformed into a 501c3 nonprofit, the Community Resilience Initiative. And so at this point, we focus on working with different communities, helping them determine what's going wrong at their Lincoln Alternative High Schools, or whatever it is in that community that exists. We do a lot of coalition building in the community of Walla Walla. It's important that the citizens drive our direction. What are we interested in working on? How can we create resilience? How can we identify the places that we're getting stuck? And we've discovered that the way to do that most appropriately in our community is by helping other coalitions get started. So we've worked with drug prevention programs, resilience focused recovery groups, suicide prevention groups. And of course, we're still heavily involved with early childhood education programs. And in addition to this community-based work, we also dabble a little bit in environmental advocacy, because we recognize that adverse catastrophic exposures like climate change or like some big storm that came through has a significant and lasting impact on a community. It is a traumatic event, and the Community Resilience Initiative is here to help prevent traumatic events from happening and heal people who have experienced traumatic events. And so climate change is high on the list. How do we engage with the community? Well, we do things that might be outside of what you would consider normal. On this particular screen, I've got a picture that was shown at an art show. We called it Together 23. It took place last year. And it was a trauma-informed recovery event. One of the coalitions that we work with recognizes that there is a link between trauma and addiction. There is similarly a link that exists between resilience and recovery. So we want to ensure that all sectors are represented. It's not enough to just work with education. It's not enough to work with just the education adjacent staff, like the nutrition staff. You want to involve the criminal justice system. You should be involving local government, other nonprofits, anyone who serves other human beings who might be suffering. Of course, in the Pacific Northwest, working with tribes is a very important thing to do. Working within enclaves. This is a big agricultural area. We have a significant number of migrant farm workers. They tend to stay in enclave situations. It's important for us to take our outreach there. It's important for us to use the native language of the people that we are speaking with. And of course, it's also important to not disregard the private sector. Here in Walla Walla, we've got something like 100 different wineries. We see those wineries as a major development of our economic progress. They employ a lot of people, and they are agents of resilience, whether they know it or not. We're also ensuring that the needs of the community is what drives the work. Part of our focus on criminal justice issues are related to the fact that Walla Walla is a prison town. Part of our work with suicide prevention recognizes that Walla Walla has statistically high rates of suicide. We also want to ensure a culturally responsive local response to increase engagement and buy-in. In the community that I live in, people can be a little suspicious of outsiders. I don't know if that sounds similar to the community that you live and work in, but to have something homegrown is generally in my community seen as something that is safe. And at every moment, we want to help people understand that we are safe. The brain chooses to either look at safety or danger, and we want to be in that safety zone. And then we also want to welcome everyone to the table with a regular, predictably scheduled community of practice, just like this community of practice that we're engaging in here. So CRI's approach can basically be boiled down in one simple graphic. And I love this little puzzle piece that says, community is the solution. It shows how each of us fit in a specific place and we contribute to the puzzle as a whole. It's not enough to just engage with social services. It's not enough to just engage with entrepreneurs. We also want to engage with law enforcement. We also want to engage with incarcerated adults. They have a voice too. Mental health, healthcare, higher education, individual neighborhoods having block parties. That's where we want to be in order to really have a good footing in our community. So we want to educate about the health effects of adverse childhood experiences and other adverse experiences such as racism, pandemics, climate change. We're here to build resilience on an individual, community, and collective level. I love how Bob started us off with those presencing and purposing exercises, because that absolutely is, and I describe it as, this is a gift you give yourself. Learning presencing skills, this is something that you can use on your own anytime you need it. And we're also focusing on whole person wellness, knowing that that involves psychological, emotional, physical, behavioral, spiritual aspects, and decreasing isolation, decreasing that loneliness by consistently and actively bringing new people and new groups into the conversation. And that's my piece. The next person we've got speaking is Mebane Boyd.
Okay. Becky, thanks. We've presented together a couple times, and and you too, Bob and Jesse. I'm always learning something new from you all. My name is Mebane Boyd. I'm the Resilient Communities Officer at the North Carolina Partnership for Children. And my background, I worked with a local resilience coalition in Wilmington, North Carolina. It was called New Hanover Resiliency Task Force. And we went through Hurricane Florence together. It was a big part of our development and change. We learned a lot through that natural disaster, and it influenced who we became. And then a little over 3 years ago, I joined the North Carolina Partnership for Children in an initiative called the North Carolina Healthy and Resilient Communities. It's funded by a private foundation, and it is focused on building resilience through multi-sector coalitions in our state. Next slide. So there are 3 goals, 3 things that we work on. And as both Bob and Becky have said, each community is different. And what priorities you're going to work on, what bubbles to the top of all the million things you could do, which things are you going to focus on are going to be different. But what do we, in that context, how do we unify our work? as a state of North Carolina? What's going to pull us together to say, hey, we're all on this same train. We might be working on different things, but we're all moving in the same direction. So developing that unifying framework. And then I spend a lot of time staying in touch with the 45 to 50, it depends on the day, local coalitions that exist in our state that are working on trauma and resilience. You know, some of them fizzle, some of them re-engage. Where are they? What are they doing now? That's a big part of my job, is staying on top of that. And then co-creating capacity building supports for these local coalitions. And we have developed just some amazing things over the last 3 years that are tools that I will share with you in just a moment. Next slide. So just quickly, here's a map of North Carolina. We have 100 counties, and of those, about 50 have some coalition that is, and so in order for your county to get filled in, you had to answer yes to 3 questions. One was, do you have a multi-sector coalition? That means you can't just have education folks at the table working on something, or it can't just be mental health people. You have to have at least 2 sectors. Are you working to build resilience or address ACEs, trauma? You had to answer yes to that question. And finally, are you meeting regularly? So currently, this is the map. It'll probably be different tomorrow. Next slide. So our framework is we talk about the 4 realms of ACEs. Many of our community started working on this when they learned about the ACEs study of adverse childhood experiences. But as you all know, and as Bob shared the ecological model, we can't just focus on the individual level of trauma, that we have to recognize that individuals and families live in a community. And so those adverse childhood experiences live amongst adverse community experiences like poverty, like lack of upward mobility, or things like housing, lack of affordable housing. And those things not only are traumas in and of themselves, but they exacerbate and make the family and individual traumas worse. And then you'll see represented by the storm cloud that adverse climate experiences also affect that's another realm of trauma. We put COVID-19 in there also because that was a collective shared trauma. And then finally on this graph represented by the groundwater, we listed atrocious cultural experiences, those experiences that people of color who live in our communities have experienced, like slavery, family separation, segregation, that live on in the bodies of people of color, that are passed down through generations through their DNA, even when those experiences weren't experienced by those individuals themselves. That trauma lives in their bodies. So we use this to talk about the 4 realms of ACEs, that we have to be aware of all the trauma that is that people are experiencing. Next slide. So how do you get started? And you'll notice that they all overlap, right? You're never done inviting. You might start with the invitation, but you will meet new people and find out about new populations or new groups of people that you want to invite. So you're never done inviting. I'm going to go into each of these 4 things to do in more detail, but I mainly wanted, and Jesse, if you could hit the enter button again, and again and again, you'll notice that these things are on a cycle that just to keep in mind. Well, we've invited the law enforcement to the table, and the sheriff showed up, but the city police department didn't. Well, they're not here, but we'll get to them, you know, when we can, or they've chosen not to come at this time, but we're not going to give up on them. But just keeping in mind that you're never done with any of these. Like, you're always planning, you're always setting goals, you're always convening, and you're always inviting. Next slide. So around inviting, and Jesse, again, just I did this to pop in, so you can just enter a bunch of these. So starting with inviting, start with your champions. One of the things we did in New Hanover County, we had a judge, Judge Jay Corpening, who, and then our district attorney, Ben David, who were both really interested in how trauma affects the people in their courtrooms. Not only did they understand this, they also had a lot of influence. And so they were invited, and they were, I remember we shared the movie Resilience, and we had been successful at getting some elected officials to come to the screening, but we had a break after the film. And I asked Judge Corpening to get on the stage to tell people to come back after the break, because I knew a lot of people were going to say, I went, I saw, I'm going home, I'm doing something else. If I asked them to stay, they weren't going to stay. But if Judge Corpening took the mic and said, I need you to stay, we're going to have better success at getting people to stay in the room. So again, start with your champions, start with the people that are easy to invite, but use their influence. Also, when you're inviting, this is some advice that I got from somebody else. Don't wait to start until everybody is there. Just get started. And because if you wait, you're never going to get started. And by the time somebody else shows up, somebody that was there in the beginning will be gone because they got tired of waiting for other people to get there. So don't wait. And then also make sure you're inviting those who are most vulnerable and are going to be affected most by the decisions that you're making. And not only should they be invited, they should have decision-making power. They ought to have just as much power, if not more, than those who typically own the power and who typically make decisions. And then finally, paying attention to who isn't in the room and try to find out why. Becky, you did a great job talking about this. You know, if the arts community is like, oh yeah, the arts community, we got to get them to the table. How about the business community? They might not realize they're part of this. How do you just continue to invite? Yes, you can learn something from this. Yes, you could do something about this in your childcare center, or yes, your what's a off the wall place, your gym would be a great place to hold some resilience education classes. So just thinking about, don't limit yourself to the folks who are typically at the table. So you've invited, now you're going to convene your meetings. It's really important to think about how you're meeting. Becky lifted up safety. How do you make your space feel safe for everyone? Can everybody say what they're thinking without repercussions? Can they say, you know, the police are spending too much time in our community if the police are at the table? How do you create spaces where everybody doesn't feel threatened and you can talk about what's really on your mind? Who's going to facilitate? Do they have convening skills? It's really important that the person in charge is aware of body language when somebody might be starting to feel unwelcome or unsafe. Do they have skills to de-escalate conversations that are starting to come apart and people are feeling attacked or judged? It's really important that your coalitions find time to connect and build relationships. And you'll get some folks that will push back on this, like we need to get to work. This is a lot of frivolous time we're spending building relationships. But actually, I think if you walk away with anything today, I hope you'll walk away that actually the building the relationships and connecting is the work. It's not something extra that you do, but actually that time that you're investing in getting to know one another, that is the work. So that next time something happens, the people in the room can pick up the phone, they know each other, they know their children's stressors, or they know what's going on in that person's life, so that they can ask about that and trust each other, and they'll get more work done because they know each other. And then I think I've addressed this. People are going to want to go fast, but you have to set very realistic expectations around what can be accomplished when you're moving a community. It's not individual treatment. It's not doing something with one individual. You're doing a whole community, and you can't do that overnight or even in a year or two. Next slide. So setting goals and priorities. What is it that you want to do? And remember that there are 4 realms of ACEs, and you can work on any of these. It's our community in New Hanover County did a pretty thorough needs assessment. We had some help doing that from Duke University that helped us on the project. And it was really helpful to, when people would ask us, well, why are you doing that? We can say, well, because 78% of the people who worked in our local DSS said that they needed more training on how to work with people who'd experienced trauma. So we had the data to back up what we chose to spend our time doing. We did lots of sticky notes, posting on Post-its, so that the people in the room felt like they had a voice in making decisions. You've probably heard the phrase, not by me, not about me. So, if you don't get to be a part of the decision making, don't tell me what you're going to do. So making sure that everybody feels like they have a voice, and that they did have a voice. And then making a decision on how you're going to measure your success. How will you know that what you've done is doing something? And then when you're setting your goals and you're creating a strategic plan, I think we can get so bogged down in, what are we going to get done this month? Then what are we going to do next month? That we actually created a strategic plan that the timeline was now, soon, and later, just giving ourselves permission to not be so specific. Like, what are some things we want to do now? And then what are some of the things we want to do next? It'll be soon, but not right now. And then things that we want to do, big things, maybe but so the timeline wasn't actually years or months. We just formulated it as now, soon, and later. And then this is a slide of a theory of change model that we developed at North Carolina Partnership for Children, talking about how to make big changes. So if your ultimate goal is healthy and resilient communities, then we had to starting going left to right. The how is so important. And some of you may recognize these 6 trauma-informed principles that come from SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. So you want to make sure that the work that you're doing has these principles. And then there's broad strategies that you can address. And many of us go to program. when we're talking about the orange, we go straight to program, but keeping in mind that we have to do all of these things. We have to change mindsets and change power structure, change the way we have relationships. We need to address policies and resources. And then we'll know we get there by these, what's in the green, the data, these things will change. I just want to mention about the orange that this comes from the ABLE theory of change, that you really have to focus on, you can't just do one or two of these. If you're going to make huge change, you have to do all of them. And I think that's my last slide. Oh, and then I would love to direct you all to our website, which is resilientnorthcarolina.org. And there you will find the 4 realms of ACEs graphic. We did a glossary. There's a resource library. Our theory of change can be found there. So, and then there's also a data dashboard where we picked some indicators that were available at the local level, meaning county level, that people could use to measure their success in building resilience. So I hope I didn't go too long. Those were my slides.
Yeah, that's no problem. Thank you, both Becky and Mebane. So let's take just one moment to just take a resilience pause, and then we're going to have question and answer for both Becky and Mebane. Take a moment, if you would, just to sort of use the skylight method to notice what's happening in your body, mind, and emotions. And then as you do that, practice resourcing again, just for a few minutes, but see if you can bring to mind a different person or resource that helps you get through difficult times and help you cope. Think more about the details about why that person or that resource, that thing helps you calm yourself. Try to bring a vivid image in your mind of that resource or that person, and then notice what's happening within you using the skylight method. Let's just take a minute to do some presencing. And I wish we had more time to do more presencing, but we don't. But let's now just have some questions and answers with Becky and Mebane. If you can post your questions in chat, issues that you're not sure about, questions that came up. And Christian, if you can read some of the questions that come up, please do that. I'll start with one that I saw. It wasn't really a question, sometimes it's a comment for both Becky and Mebane. How do you talk about these issues with people in the community? How do you talk about resilience? Because some people just don't like the term, or they think, oh, well, I'm supposed to be resilient despite all these things happening to me. Any suggestions, comments on how to talk about, respond, and help people understand what you're doing?
I saw this comment just now, and I couldn't agree more. I think the word resilient now, resilience has some, what's the word I'm looking for? It's heavy. It's not, people, we started hearing people say, why do you keep telling me to be more resilient? Stop oppressing me. There are a lot of communities that don't want to use that word. And we keep coming back to it thinking we're looking at community resilience, not so much individual resilience. So creating communities where individuals don't have to be so resilient is I think a way to confront that word resilience. Working to create resilient organizations, resilient communities. Also, we're using terms like healing-centered, trauma-informed, trauma-resilient, trauma-competent. But I couldn't agree more about that word resilient. It's loaded.
Bob,
Becky?
Becky has an elderly dog, and she sent me a message that now was the time that her dog decided that it was bathroom time, so she'll come back on. But I just
Okay.
want to acknowledge, I remember when writing the Louisiana State Trauma Informed Care Plan, or I didn't write it, but I supported the group that was in charge of that. Just recognizing from the comment very quickly, not to step in for Becky, but the term resilience is like recognizing the cultural and historical implications of the word, because that word in Louisiana has been used so much, I remember, in that group since Hurricane Katrina. So we're looking at almost 20 years of people being exhausted by the word. Just that recognizing that in different states and different communities, different language may be impactful, while the principles and values that we are trying to move forward with to build what on this call we may be calling community resilience or transformational resilience is so important. And so having that community input into what language resonates is just a really important point, that I think that this conversation uplifts and will look different community to community, state to state, depending on different circumstances.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse. That's the point. Just make sure you check in with you ask people that you're working with to help you understand what words, what terms resonate with them. One other thing I'll say, we did a survey. Christy, wasn't able to join us today, did a survey of different terms, sending it out to a bunch of folks, and we have the result of that survey on our website. What terms to use when you're talking about these issues. But again, depends on what community you're in, and what groups and populations you're working with. Each will respond differently. So, Christian, can you see other questions that are there?
Yes. So regarding region of practice, someone asks, did either community experience a severe weather event? And if so, how is the community response different than before having a resilience coordinating network?
Great question.
So I can respond to what happened in New Hanover County after Hurricane Florence. Our coalition was just getting started. In fact, I started my position in July of 2018, and Hurricane Florence hit in September. So just a couple months in, and we had this weather event, and things did not go well. Our community response folks, our county employees, people like librarians, people who take tax payments, were in the shelters. That's their the system is that the Red Cross takes over 48 hours after the disaster event. There's enough time to get folks in and to take over those shelters. Well, what happened with Hurricane Florence was that our city, all the rivers that surround our city flooded, and the Red Cross, who had evacuated because it was a Category 4 storm, couldn't get back in. And so those county employees were in there for over 70 plus hours while their own families were going through the effects of the storm. And so the staff was traumatized. And following the storm, the county manager, those who were in HR, recognized how much harm had been done to their employees. And so the response for Hurricane Florence wasn't good because we weren't ready. But following that, all of our county employees are required to go through training on self-regulation. They have to learn about different ways to regulate their body's stress responses. It's now a part of all onboarding for all staff. And there are groups that it's resulted in groups like our 911 responders have gatherings regularly to check in on one another. And the culture of our county government has completely changed, with much better relationships and asking how one another is doing, resulting in lower staff turnover following the storm. So during the storm, things weren't great because the value of it, we didn't realize, but following that, it resulted in just a better uptake of the resources that our coalition was offering.
And let me offer one thing, and then Becky, if you have a comment on it, if you heard the question, but we just experienced a major ice storm where I live in Oregon, and just exactly what Mebane just said. The emergency responders really couldn't get to the people who needed help for the most part because of the ice storm and all the trees that were down across roads, et cetera, et cetera. And it was neighbors helping neighbors and other people engaging with others. It's that social support networks, those social horizontal infrastructures, I call it, that really made the difference. But our disaster response systems are set up very differently. They think they're supposed to take over, but they are traumatized and or they can't help. So they're, again, going to continue to be very important. But the more we integrate that into a broader approach, the better. Becky, anything you want to add?
I'm reminded of the heat dome that we experienced and all of the smoke that we had in the Pacific Northwest in the last few years. And that's something that emergency responders, they can't respond to. So integrating that resilience into the community is so important, and teaching people those resilient skills, teaching people those presencing skills, making sure that people are connecting with one another, because the only thing we can really do under those conditions is try to survive and get along with each other and check in with other people. How are you doing? We have a robust emergency response team in Walla Walla, but that wasn't really something that they could respond to. It was a disaster, nonetheless. It was certainly related to climate change, but it wasn't a specific event that gathered any sort of response other than the response of the community within.
Great, thank you. Actually, I think we're out of time for questions and answers, but if you put other questions in chat, we will try to respond to them afterwards. I want to thank both of you, Becky and Mebane, for taking the time to making this presentation. Your presentation's just very, very helpful, I think. I hope to everybody, and I found it very helpful. I want to now, just because we only have about a little over 15 minutes left, I want to take time for some breakout rooms to allow you to talk among each other. And actually, let's make this, this 10-minute breakout room. So briefly, Jesse will divide you up again. Please share what you just heard and gained from Becky and Mebane, questions that emerge. And if you're not involved with a local resilience coordinating network of some kind, discuss how you can reach out to a neighbor or others in your community about forming one. Or if you are already involved in some type of local network, discuss how you can sort of help them expand to address these disasters and toxic stresses generated by the climate emergency. So we'll come back in 10 minutes and close up for the day. So Jesse's going to divide you up now into breakout rooms. Thank you again, Mebane and Becky.
Rooms should be open. See you all soon.
Yes, here's one from prior to our breakout groups regarding our practice skills. Besides good facilitation skills and people with lived experience or who are the most impacted, what other skills or backgrounds do you think are most key to this initial work? What's the dream team?
Becky, you want to take a shot at it? The dream team. I'll take a first shot then. I think we've already heard it, and that is getting people who value relationships more than anything, that and help people understand that they're valued. That's really key. That helping, and some people don't do that. We were just talking about it ourselves during the breakout room, that some people prioritize their own wealth or credit or attention or whatever it might be. You really want people involved who value the connections and helping everybody else feel like they matter. Matterness, if you will, could be one part of it. You know, that's the dream team, having everybody focused on helping everybody feel like they matter. Anybody else want to comment? Becky?
Well, you know, I'm just going to go back to an experience I had when I started the Resiliency Task Force. I was working for an organization named Communities in Schools. They got the grant to do the work. And when I arrived on the job, they had business cards for me with the logo of communities and schools on it. And I said, I can't use these because this is a community, it's not a communities and schools initiative. It needs to, if this is an initiative for the community, we need our own logo. This is all of us. It's not one organization. So I think Bob is spot on around ownership. People who don't want the limelight, people who aren't going to want to, share the work, share the success, people who can think about us instead of me.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with Mebane on that one. We're looking for that altruism. We're looking for the people who are here for the work itself, not here for the glory or the funding that may come with it. Those people who are really excited and really committed to building community for the sake of community.
It's often called servant leadership. That's one of the terms for it. One last question, if there is one, and then we better wrap up.
Yeah, here's one. What efforts do you make to include marginalized or high-risk folks in your resilience network?
Becky or Mebane?
Go ahead.
I mean,
Becky.
it goes beyond making a seat at the table, right? Because just having a seat at the table doesn't necessarily mean that somebody's going to fill it. This is really where it comes down to that outreach. It comes down to making sure that you are connecting with folks who are marginalized, making sure that you're encouraging everyone to take a seat at the table, and also recognizing that sometimes it takes a special touch, and ultimately it comes down to that basic safety versus threat, being that safe place for a person's idea, being a safe place for a different identity or gender expression or whatever it is, being open and welcoming from the get-go and doing that outreach.
Yeah, and there's some really good stuff coming in the chat about this, providing food, childcare. There are some organizations in North Carolina that pay families to come to their meetings. Those of us who are in this work are paid to be at our meetings. Why shouldn't a family member who is giving up their time to be at these meetings, why shouldn't they also be compensated? So, how do you pay for that? Are you providing your information in more than one language? What are you doing to ensure that people feel comfortable and can get the most out of your meetings? Really thinking through that and finding funding to do that is important.
Right.
And
Thank you.
providing childcare whenever it's possible, feasible, or within the budget. Childcare, we have found, at least in our community, is a pretty big driver of getting different sectors represented in those community meetings.
Thank you both for those comments, and thank you for the questions. You will see all the questions in the chat that'll be posted on the Climate Forum website. We're out of time now, so here's your homework assignment for this. Take a resilience pause once a day and practice resourcing. We went through that pretty quickly, but see if you can practice resourcing, and then try to teach resourcing to somebody else, using the terms that were on the slides, just to try to begin to practice it. Again, it's once you try to get it out of your mouth and sort of describe it, then you learn more about it yourself. And we're gonna post some forms that allow you to assess the degree to which your community is trauma organized or resilience enhancing. You take a look at that, and just as a way to help. And then if there is not a local resilience network of some type in your neighborhood or community, reach out to a few people that you might think are interested in forming one. Share and discuss your elevator speech about why you think this would be a good thing to do and what it is, what it would accomplish. Ask them if they will help you form a resilience network. And then together, sort of describe an initial vision. What are we trying to achieve? And what's your vision of success? So once we do this for 5 years, what will happen? If there is an existing resilience network in your group, in your community, reach out to a couple of people, if you're a member of them, and share your elevator speech and see if they might be interested in using a public health approach to build population level mental wellness and resilience. They might already be doing that, and discuss how you might be able to help the organization do that. And then also during this week, please decide if you want to attend the first special session we're going to hold, which is not this Thursday, but the following Thursday after next Tuesday's session. It's voluntary and there is no preset agenda. There's no presenters per se. It's a session that allow people in the mental health, human services, disaster management, and faith and spiritual and other human services field just to meet and discuss, to have more time to discuss the issues than we've had today. And then we're going to meet again on the 27th, next Tuesday. So, and focus on how do you begin building capacity in the community. So with that, I want to thank again our presenters. Thank you both, Becky and Mebane, very much. And thank you all for joining us. And please put comments on the Climate Forum website. Let us know how things are going. And we look forward to seeing you next week. So take care, everybody. Have a good week. Appreciate it. Take care.